Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a really fascinating topic today. It's all about confidence, or maybe more accurately, about the lack of it. We'll be looking at it through the lens of the book, The Confidence Code.
Yeah, and a really interesting aspect of the book is that it focuses on confidence, especially when it comes to women.
Right. We've all seen those headlines about how even the most accomplished women, people like IMF head Christine Lagarde, sometimes struggle with self-doubt. So we'll try to unpack all of that. We'll look at what the science has to say about confidence and whether we can actually, rewire our brains to be more self-assured.
It's a big question. Can we actually crack this confidence code, or is it just something we're stuck with?
I love that. Cracking the confidence code, that's what we're here to do. What I really appreciate about this book is it's not just a bunch of feel-good affirmations.
Definitely not.
Hmm.
The authors really dig into the research, blend that with personal stories, and then give us actual strategies to try. It's a really practical approach, which I think is what a lot of us are looking for.
Absolutely. And one of the things that jumped out at me early on was this whole idea of the confidence gap between men and women. I mean, we all sort of sense it, right? But the book actually backs it up with some pretty solid research.
Yeah, they cite a 2011 study by the Institute of Leadership and Management that found a pretty significant difference in how men and women perceive their abilities.
Mhm.
Like over half of the women who were surveyed said they felt self-doubt about their work and their careers,
Wow, over half.
compared to less than a third of the men.
That's a huge difference. And it's not just statistics, right? The book brings this gap to life with stories of real women. I was thinking about Vanessa, the fundraiser.
Oh, yeah.
They kept telling her she needed to be more decisive, even if it meant making the wrong call sometimes. And then there were those WNBA stars, Crystal and Monique.
Right, and they talked about how they felt so much pressure and self-doubt, which, their male counterparts didn't seem to experience as much.
Hmm.
Which is interesting, right? Because you'd think in a field that's dominated by women that maybe those pressures wouldn't be there.
Totally. And then you have Claire, the journalist, who for years she just attributed all of her success to luck.
Oh, I know. So many of us do that, right? Downplaying our wins, overanalyzing our setbacks. It's no wonder our confidence takes a hit sometimes.
It really makes you stop and think, what even is confidence? I mean, we throw that word around a lot, but the book does a good job of sort of breaking it down and, showing how it's different from things like self-esteem and self-compassion. They're all important, of course, but they're not quite the same thing.
Yeah, self-esteem is more about your overall sense of worth, regardless of what you achieve or don't achieve. It's like the foundation.
Okay, the foundation, I like that.
And then self-compassion is more about treating yourself with kindness, especially when you mess up. It's like being your own best friend, even when you make mistakes.
So where does confidence fit into all of this?
Confidence is more specific. It's the belief in your ability to handle a particular situation or task. The book uses this example of Andre Agassi, who was like incredibly confident on the tennis court, but struggled with self-doubt in other areas of his life.
It's like you can be fluent in one language, but struggle with another. You can be super confident in one area, but totally insecure in another.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to, the next piece of the puzzle, which is the science behind confidence. Because it turns out our brains are wired in ways that can either help or hinder our feelings of self-assurance. It's not just about positive thinking, right? There's actual brain chemistry involved.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more.
Well, the book talks about how serotonin plays a role,
Hmm.
especially in the prefrontal cortex. It helps us regulate emotions and make decisions, from a calmer place.
Right, so if you have enough serotonin, you're more likely to be, steady and confident.
Exactly. And then there's dopamine, which is all about motivation and reward. It's what drives us to explore and take risks. And, some of this comes down to our genes. Research suggests that certain gene variations can actually affect how our brains process these neurochemicals.
Wait, are you saying there's a confidence gene?
Well, not a single gene, but there are a couple of key players. There's one called DRD4, which is sometimes called the adventure gene. One variation of it, DRD47R, is linked to risk-taking behavior. Those are the people who love that dopamine rush that comes with, pushing boundaries.
So, my friend who's always up for anything, always wants to try something new.
That's probably them. Then there's the COMT gene, which they call the warrior-worrier gene. Different variations of this gene affect how quickly your brain clears out dopamine from the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, I'm following. So how does that tie into confidence?
Well, people with the worrier variation clear dopamine slowly, which is actually good in calm situations because it helps them focus. But when they're under stress, their bodies pump out more dopamine. And it can lead to this overload in the prefrontal cortex that kind of hit a wall.
Ah, so it's like their brains just can't handle the pressure, and that obviously affects their confidence.
Exactly. And then there's the warrior variation, which clears dopamine more quickly. These folks might have a harder time focusing when things are calm, but when they're under pressure, they're less likely to experience that shutdown.
So are you saying that some of us are just like genetically predisposed to be more or less confident? That's a bit disheartening, isn't it?
Well, it's definitely a factor. But here's the good news. The book talks about how this field of cognitive therapy is showing that, we're not actually stuck with the brains we're born with. We can actually use neuroplasticity, which is like the brain's ability to change, to actually rewire our thinking patterns for greater confidence.
So even if we don't win the genetic lottery, we can still train our brains to be more confident. Yeah.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing. It means we have more control than we think.
So how do we actually do that? What kind of actions can we take to, actually build confidence?
Well, the book has a lot of practical tips, but one that I thought was really interesting is the idea that our modern parenting styles, even with all the best intentions, might actually be holding kids back, especially girls, when it comes to developing real confidence.
Really? How so?
Well, they talk about how this emphasis on constant praise and shielding kids from failure, it might be making them more fragile, less resilient. Like we're so busy trying to protect them from making mistakes that we're actually preventing them from learning and growing from those experiences.
Right. So instead of letting them struggle a bit and figure things out on their own, we're kind of sending this message that they have to be perfect all the time to be loved and accepted.
Exactly. And then they hit the real world and it's like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? We all make mistakes. It's how we learn and grow.
Absolutely. And the book contrasts this with the way a lot of successful women were raised. Like they talk about Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, who was babysitting at 6, hitchhiking at 16, and sent off to America alone at 20. Or Lydia Sarfati, the skincare mogul, who was basically told, figure it out, when she faced obstacles.
That's pretty intense. I mean, I get the point, but those are some pretty extreme examples, right?
They are. But it highlights this idea that those challenges, even when they were tough, helped those women develop grit and resilience.
Okay. I can see that. It's like learning to ride a bike, right?
Yeah.
You're going to fall a few times, but each time you get back up, you learn something, you get a little bit better, a little more confident.
Exactly. And it's not just about letting kids fail. It's also about shifting the focus from winning to effort and mastery. Like they talk about how competitive sports, while not for everyone, can be a great way for kids to learn resilience, They learn how to deal with both victory and defeat, and they start to realize that their self-worth isn't tied to a scoreboard.
Right, because life isn't always about winning, and knowing how to bounce back from setbacks is key for maintaining confidence. So how do we apply this to, our own lives?
That's a great question. Maybe it's about reframing how you view failure, Instead of seeing it as a personal shortcoming, maybe it's an opportunity to learn and grow. Or maybe it's about focusing more on the effort you put in rather than just the outcome.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly. And the book actually gives a lot of practical tips for building confidence in everyday life, too. Like they talk about the importance of speaking up more. It sounds so simple, but I think a lot of us, especially women, tend to hold back from sharing our ideas even when we know they're valuable.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that, especially in meetings or group settings. That fear of judgment can be really paralyzing.
I hear you. But the book really encourages us to push past that fear and recognize that our voices deserve to be heard. They even give some tips for how to do it effectively. Like if you're terrified of public speaking, which a lot of people are, prepare thoroughly, focus on the message you want to convey, and watch your tone. Like ditch that upspeak, those questioning inflections at the end of sentences.
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. I never even noticed.
It can make you sound less confident, even if you don't feel that way.
Wow, I'm definitely going to be paying attention to that from now on. So what else can we do?
Another powerful strategy is challenging those negative automatic thoughts, those gnats.
You mean those little voices in our heads that whisper things like, you're not good enough or you're going to fail miserably?
Exactly. And the book gives techniques for identifying those gnats and consciously replacing them with more positive, realistic thoughts. Like instead of thinking, I'm going to totally bomb this interview, you could say to yourself, I've prepared well, I have the skills they're looking for, and I'm going to do my best to showcase my abilities.
It's like taking control of that inner critic and rewriting the script, right?
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the importance of taking risks, like stepping outside your comfort zone, even in small ways, can really help build your confidence muscle.
I love that, the confidence muscle. And it goes back to what we were saying about parenting, right? If we never allow ourselves to make mistakes or like even fail sometimes, we're never going to really grow.
Right. It's about embracing those opportunities for growth, knowing that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey.
I like that failure is part of the journey. And speaking of journeys, the book also talks about the importance of, owning your accomplishments, not downplaying your wins or attributing them to luck.
That's huge. And, women especially tend to minimize their achievements.
Yeah.
But owning your successes is so powerful. It helps you internalize that sense of, like, yeah, I did that, and I can do it again.
So it seems like there's a lot we can do to cultivate confidence. But it's interesting how the book also gets into these more nuanced aspects, especially for women, like how that traditional, kind of male model of confidence might not always be the best fit.
Right. I mean, think about it. The stereotypical image of a confident person is often someone who's loud, assertive, maybe even aggressive. And that can be a really tricky line for women to walk, especially in the workplace.
Oh, totally. It's like there's this double standard. A man who speaks his mind is seen as confident and decisive, but a woman who does the same thing is labeled as aggressive or bossy.
Exactly. And the book suggests that women might need to find different ways to express their confidence, ways that feel authentic to them and align with their values. It's not about trying to be like men. It's about recognizing that confidence can be quiet and understated.
Okay, I like that. Quiet confidence.
It can be about listening attentively, collaborating effectively, and speaking with clarity and conviction, even if it's not the loudest voice in the room.
It's about owning your power, whatever form that takes.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means pushing back against those societal expectations that tell women to be nice all the time, even when it means silencing themselves.
But because being likable shouldn't come at the expense of being respected.
Exactly. And this actually leads to another really interesting concept from the book. They talk about how our perception of competence, how competent we appear to be, can actually be more important than our actual competence when it comes to how others perceive us.
So it's not just about being good at what you do, it's about projecting that image of confidence and capability.
Yes. They talk about this research by Cameron Anderson, a psychologist at UC Berkeley. He found that people who seem confident, even if they aren't necessarily more skilled, are often judged as more competent. And they're more likely to be given opportunities for advancement.
So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The more confident you appear, the more opportunities you get, and then the more opportunities you get, the more confident you become.
That's the idea. And it really highlights how important it is to focus on developing our skills. A&D cultivating those outward expressions of confidence, like strong body language, a clear and assertive voice, and a willingness to take risks.
Because even if we have all the knowledge and experience in the world, if we don't project confidence, people might not take us seriously.
Exactly. And it's not about being fake or arrogant. It's about owning your worth and letting your inner confidence shine through.
Mhm.
And you know what? Even if you don't feel confident all the time, acting as if you do can actually start to shift your internal state.
It's like that fake it till you make it thing, but for confidence.
Exactly. Our brains are amazing. They can adapt. Research shows that even pretending to feel confident can trigger the release of those feel-good neurochemicals we were talking about before,
Yeah.
like dopamine and serotonin. And that can actually lead to real, lasting changes in our brain chemistry.
Wow. So we can basically trick our brains into believing we're confident, and then that can lead to actual, genuine confidence.
Pretty cool, right? And the book also goes into some techniques from cognitive therapy that can help us, like rewire our thinking patterns and build lasting confidence. For example, they talk about mindfulness meditation, which has been shown to have amazing benefits for reducing stress and anxiety, which are obviously huge confidence killers.
I've heard so much about mindfulness. How does that actually work in terms of boosting confidence?
Well, studies show that regular meditation can actually change the structure of our brains. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that handles executive function and decision-making, and it shrinks the amygdala, which is like the fear center of the brain.
So it's like meditation helps us quiet those anxious thoughts and strengthens our ability to think clearly and calmly, even when we're under pressure.
Exactly. It's like building this mental buffer zone that allows us to respond to challenges with more composure and self-assurance. And even ties back to what we were talking about with those warrior and warrior gene variants. Like, even if you have the warrior variant, practicing mindfulness can help you manage stress and prevent that dopamine overload that can happen in high-pressure situations.
So it's like, even if we're not genetically predisposed to be super confident, we still have the power to, like, rewire our brains for greater resilience.
Absolutely. And remember those negative automatic thoughts we were talking about? Mindfulness can also help us become more aware of those gnats and choose to respond to them differently. It's like we become the observer of our thoughts rather than getting swept away by them.
So instead of letting those negative thoughts run the show, we can step back and choose how we want to respond.
Exactly. And the book gives lots of specific techniques for challenging those gnats. It's all about consciously replacing those negative thoughts with alternative, more positive interpretations.
So it's like creating a new mental script, one that supports our confidence instead of undermining it.
Precisely. And the more we practice those positive affirmations and visualizations, the more we strengthen those neural pathways in our brains, making it easier to, like, default to those confident thoughts and behaviors.
It's amazing how much power we have to shape our own minds.
It really is. And another important point the book makes is the power of role models. Like, seeing other people, especially women, succeeding in areas where we might feel insecure can be incredibly motivating.
It's like having proof that it's possible, that our dreams are achievable.
Exactly. And they talk about how visualizing ourselves, achieving our goals, can actually activate the same neural pathways in our brains as actually performing the action.
So it's like tricking our brains into believing we've already accomplished what we're aiming for. I love that.
It's about creating a mental blueprint for success. And when we combine that visualization with action, we create this amazing synergy that can really propel us forward.
It's just so inspiring to realize that confidence isn't this, like, fixed trait. It's a skill we can learn and strengthen over time. It's a journey, not a destination.
That's a perfect way to put it. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. We all have moments of self-doubt.
Yeah.
But having a supportive community, mentors, or even just like the stories of other women who have paved the way can make a huge difference.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. And by supporting each other, we can create a world where confidence and empowerment are the norm, not the exception. It really is powerful to remember that we're not alone in this. We all have those moments, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's just part of being human. And actually, the book makes this interesting point that confidence can actually be kind of contagious. Like when we see other people, especially, people we admire, when we see them embody confidence, it can be really inspiring for us to step into our own power.
Right? It's like this ripple effect. Like
Yeah.
one person's confidence can create this, like, wave that lifts up everyone around them. And I think that's especially important for women, right? Because we often face, like, unique challenges, societal pressures when it comes to confidence and leadership.
Definitely. I mean, the more confident women there are out there in the world, leading businesses, speaking up, taking risks, the more it creates space for other women to do the same.
It's like this positive feedback loop. Confidence breeds more confidence. And that can ultimately lead to a world where, girls and women feel empowered to achieve their full potential regardless of the obstacles.
Exactly. And that's why I love that this book, it doesn't just offer like theoretical insights. It gives us actual actions we can take to build our own confidence. Remember we were talking about like those small, brave steps we can take outside our comfort zone.
Yeah, and how even those seemingly small acts of courage can kind of snowball into something bigger, right?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the confidence code, I want to leave you with this challenge. What's one small, brave step you can take this week, maybe towards a goal that you've been putting off? It doesn't have to be huge, just a step in the right direction.
That's a great challenge. And, it reminds me of that quote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." It's so easy to get stuck in that, like, overthinking mode, right?
Analysis paralysis.
Yes. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just take that first step and trust that the momentum will follow.
Exactly. And remember, confidence is a journey, not a destination. There will be setbacks along the way. You're going to stumble. You might even fall. But it's about getting back up, learning from those experiences, and continuing to move forward.
It's about embracing the process, knowing that it's okay to not have all the answers or feel confident all the time, and remembering that we don't have to do it alone. We can lean on our support systems, find mentors, draw inspiration from the stories of other women who have paved the way.
Absolutely. We're all in this together. And by supporting each other, lifting each other up, celebrating those successes, we can create a world where confidence and empowerment are just the norm.
So to our listeners, we encourage you, Take that challenge, take that first step, no matter how small. Trust in your own potential because it's incredible. And remember, confidence is contagious. So by stepping into your own power, you're inspiring others to do the same. And that's how we create real change.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep believing in the power of your own unique voice. You've got this.